Stop the bad.
Welcome to Mama What's Next, your career podcast for mums. This is our space to be brave, real, and authentic, and to really celebrate that. This podcast is all about trusting our inner voice and following the path that truly lights us up. Because let's be honest, life is too short to settle for anything less than your passion. I'm your host, Meli. Thank you so much for being here. Hey everybody, it's been a while that we've had a little chat. I have been focusing on interviews recently, and I keep being asked by people I should talk about my life and my experience a little bit more. Meli, why don't you speak about what you've done? Why don't you talk about how you've, gone to Australia, how you've changed your jobs? How did you manage to go to Mallorca? How do you make it all work with a child by yourself, solo parenting? So yeah, there are many stories to tell. And today I want to talk about how to take calculated risks. I actually, in Australia in 2018, I think it was, when I started working with Diageo, in what I still would say is one of my absolute dream roles that I've had as a corporate social responsibility manager as part of the corporate relations team. I felt I was really making an impact on people's lives, not just, with regards to the work we were doing for, with charities and, non-profit projects, or the alcohol education programs I was running in schools. It was also the work I was doing internally for employees and for the team culture and internal engagement, which was an absolute amazing feeling that in that kind of capacity I had never had before. And it's always tricky when you start to, I've actually changed careers quite a few times. There were probably 3 major career shifts that I've made in my life. So I come from a marketing background and I've worked in marketing forever. And I loved marketing. I loved it. And I made little shifts. So I've worked across, I don't know how many there are, 33, 35 by now, roles, approximately. And which sounds crazy, really, doesn't it? They're not all on my CV. There's lots of little side projects and entrepreneurial kind of ventures I have done besides my main work always. I love building and creating things and developing something out of nothing. And it's a real passion of mine. And when I was working in marketing, I think the biggest shift I had when I had my daughter, and a few years into having her, I had quite a difficult time actually, when I realized one day, sitting at my computer, and I was just doing a side project at the time that I kind of kept my focus on, but then I realized, I don't know, that's going to be like a full-time kind of gig. I really need to refocus and figure out what to do as a next step. So as I was sitting there, I fell into probably the deepest hole ever so far. Well, actually, there were 2. That was the first one. I basically realized I'm not excited about the traditional marketing roles anymore that I used to be always excited about. And it was really incredibly difficult because I had always been excited about it, about new brands, about, new teams, new products. I sat there and I didn't even know where to start, what to do, where to turn. And it felt incredibly lonely, to be honest. And I realized I had somehow changed. And so I've always loved reading books about, personal development in a way that I learned something about, personal strengths and how to coach myself, how to develop myself. And I went on a search to find a career book and landed on What Color is Your Parachute? And it was such an incredible book. I still remember when I shared it with my partner at the time, he was laughing because I said, you should be doing this. This is so cool. Like, you get to explore so much about yourself. And he was like, nah, you're not going to get me to do that. It was literally 3 months of hard work. And I remember just the clarity that came with every step. And it makes you go through all your previous roles and tasks and the environments you worked in, the people you worked with, what kind of responsibility you had, everything, literally everything. And it was quite interesting to then just see how coming to life that picture of me needing a particular kind of company to work with. And I realized I needed a lot of self-responsibility, autonomy, being able to take risks. And I needed to be with a company that is not too traditional and corporate and kind of slow-moving. I needed to be with teams and a company that's fast-moving, that wants to take risks and is somehow entrepreneurial without being necessarily a startup. And I also realized I really needed to make an impact with people. And I needed to find something that lets me contribute to society, to the environment, all the things that I cared about, whilst at the same time still having a commercial focus. So it's quite interesting. And then you dive through all the things that there are and the tasks. And it was quite interesting because then essentially it's important also to do a little bit of a review of what's actually available on the market at the time. Like, is what you are looking for something that the market needs? It's similar to the Japanese ikigai, where you pick, what you're really good at, what you love to be doing, but also it's really, really important to find something that you can be paid for, that the market needs. And yes, and essentially something that you are really good at too. So your skills need to match, obviously, that particular thing that you want to do. So corporate social responsibility at the time was just like emerging, and there wasn't such a strong focus on sustainability yet in the way that we have it now. And I've always been someone to look at a new chapter and a new path as an opportunity and something that from the beginning I never go, well, this isn't something I can't do. I'm always looking at it as a challenge, as an adventure, essentially, particularly professionally. And so I thought, whilst I don't have all the skills available, I still, to me, because there were certainly things I did not have exposure to before in the way that I probably needed to have to be great at this role. But many things, I think, are transferable skills from marketing into corporate social responsibility. So I basically just focused on, okay, how can I sell what I have for that particular role, and what would I need in order to be considered, a package that the company would be considering as valuable for this particular role. And what have I done in my past roles that I can carve out, that I can use, that I can strip out of my roles, of my previous roles, and repackage in a way that makes sense for this particular role. So for example, what I've done, I had worked with a fundraising platform, a crowdfunding platform in Australia, the biggest one at the time. And I was their head of digital. Generally, on my resume, that didn't really make so much sense because people were always going, why is she going from marketing into like a digital production role? We don't really understand that. And at least in Australia, it was somewhat understandable to people, so I was able to work with that. However, if that would have been the German market, it's a little bit tricky. Like you always need to find ways to package it up in a different kind of way. So usually that was a position and a role that I was hiding. I was suppressing it in my resume. And in order, like, for people not to be confused, because you always need to have a bit of a proper, they need to be able to see the path you're taking and where it's leading you, and it needs to make sense to them. So, however, for this particular role as a CSR, corporate social responsibility role, it actually made so much sense to actually pull out that role and make it almost bigger than it was, because my core focus was working with charities and nonprofits and helping them raise money for, projects. And and that was one of the key elements of that role back in the day that I needed to have experience there, ideally. So that became one of the main pillars. And then I thought, okay, I still haven't really got any certification in this area. I haven't done anything yet. So I started searching and trying to understand, okay, what are the possibilities? Like, what can I actually do short term to brush up on my experience, to understand more about sustainable practices in companies, how to build sustainable businesses. And I landed on a Harvard online business course that went for about, I think it's like 1.5, 2 months. And it was such an amazing, like, not just as a tool to get to an interview stage, but I also, doing that course, I also realized how much I loved that content and how much I loved how they were exploring the strategies companies were developing to become more sustainable, to analyze their practices in companies, and how to build programs that were outstanding. And it became apparent to me at the time as well how they were packaging it up and marketing it. So, for example, Procter & Gamble was one of the key companies that was highlighted in one of the projects. And I just got so excited. And because I think that also helped me. So I think that's something I would really recommend to, people wanting to make that shift, to really, like Stephen Pressfield says it in his book, put your ass where your heart wants to be. So that's what the book is called. And you really need to put yourself into that physical place so that you start to feel what it's like to work in this environment. You start to think and feel these thoughts. It's extremely critical to be doing that. And I then realized how excited I was every day learning about this. It was almost like it was my reality already at the time, and there were work groups, like it was a great program actually. I got to connect with someone from New York and Australia, and at the time I was in Switzerland, and we got to work on little projects together. It was so much fun. And it made me realize that this is the place. That's what I want to be doing. Even though it felt like quite a stretch, I realized there were other people. And that's another, reason why you need to get out there and just start doing it. Sometimes you will also realize there's other people that are just at the same place in the same situation. And so there were women with me in this program that similarly, they just took this as a stepping stone to get to the next level. And we were equally excited about what's to come. And it made me feel like I was living it. I was breathing it. It was part of my reality. I was creating that reality. And it was so much fun. And whilst I was doing that, I could already see myself working there. I could already see myself doing that in companies. And I wanted it so much and I felt it so much. It became so real. I wasn't scared anymore because my excitement for that particular role just grew exponentially. And I ended up thinking, what are the kind of companies I wanted to work with? And to mind came always Diageo. And Diageo was my first corporate job that I entered into after working with companies on a freelance basis when I was younger and at a legal office as a paralegal. I did lots of other things before. But in Australia, the first sort of proper corporate job that I had in my early 20s was with Diageo. And back then already was the job that I feel to this day, I really manifested that into reality. And essentially, though, I still say it was the worst job in the company that I had at the time. I was trying to get out of it in the end, trying to move within the company, but they wouldn't let me. And I'm not someone to hang around in environments where I'm not happy. So I left and went on to another great company. But at the time, it never really let me go because what I really loved working there was the dynamic atmosphere, the entrepreneurial spirit, the excitement, the people. It was fun. It was fast. We were having so much success. I was learning like a ton of things there. Like I still remember I was so young and they would really give you a chance and you were able to contribute to bigger projects, to more exciting tasks. And that normally sometimes in companies, they would go, oh, that's not really part of what you're doing, part of your role. But there you always got, in my situation, I always got the opportunity to stretch and to grow and to develop. And I did really appreciate that. And I also loved the exciting brands, this feeling of success that we had, and it was a nice team environment. So essentially, after leaving there and moving on to different companies, it never really let me, I never really was able to let go of the idea that if I just would have had that awesome job there, it would have been even exponentially even better. But my job really... I think at the beginning it was called sales productivity analyst, and then it was a sales coordinator. Working within the key accounts team, I was doing key account coordination between trade marketing and the sales team. It was interesting, but the majority, it was interesting because I made it interesting. So I always had a way of developing new things, new processes, new ideas within my field of work when I got bored. And I did that there too, and it was appreciated. But at the same time, after, I don't know how long it was, a year and a half, 2 years, I was like, oh my God, I want to get into marketing, and they just wouldn't let me. There was always another possibility was passed on. I was passed on. And so I got upset and then I left. So, but I was never really able to let it go. So in my mind, I always felt I needed to go back there, and I wanted to go back there. So I think for some reason it was so present in my mind, and I I felt there had to be a CSR role at Diageo. And bringing both of that together in my mind, in my heart, and I almost felt like I was seeing myself working there already. And I was in Australia at the time. I was searching through job offers, and whilst I was also applying for marketing roles, nothing really ever worked out, which in the past hadn't been the case before. So I was like, this is something, I just felt my heart was elsewhere, and I kept looking at roles from Diageo, and I'm like, no, but this isn't the right thing. I don't want to go into a brand management role. No. This is not what I wanted to do. And I had already been there for quite a few months and with my daughter, and it was quite a difficult situation actually, because I moved with her, to several places. There was a time when I was even living at a friend's place, and we occupied one of her dorm rooms essentially. And I was living there with my 3-year-old. It was quite surreal. Like, even when I think about it now, I'm like, oh my God, how did I even manage to do that? But it was fun. It was free. It was exciting. It was adventurous. And I had given myself, I think like a year, I gave myself at the time going back to work in Australia. And I was like, something has to happen in that year. Otherwise, I'll go back to Europe. And one day I just looked at LinkedIn, I think it was. Yes, it was LinkedIn. And I looked at the job advertisements, and there it was. There was a corporate social responsibility manager at Diageo. And it still almost makes me tear up now thinking about it, because I just couldn't believe it. But I could believe it. It was finally there. And it was never like I was holding on to it too much. Essentially, it was a way of like believing CSR is the right area, wanting to be there so much, but also with Diageo still in the back of my mind, feeling like that kind of company I would really feel comfortable working in. I think it's the right fit for me. And when I saw that role, I was like, yeah, and that is, it's just like that way of, I did let it go. It wasn't something like, when you think about manifestation as well, and you think about how sometimes people just really frustrated and they can't let go of it and you're holding on to it too tightly. The key, I think, is like letting it go and having faith and trust. And because I had given myself a year, I had already booked the flight back to Europe, and I was like, okay, if it's not here, it's going to be elsewhere. It's fine. And there was this role, and of course I applied for it and I got an interview. And and then the process followed, and I still remember there was a change in leadership at the time, and I was in Europe for Christmas, I think it was, and I still didn't know if I'm going to get the role. And I had interviewed with my future boss, but then she left. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And I had an interview then I remember being back in Sydney, and they told me who the new leadership was in the team, and it was a woman that had previously worked as the chief of staff for Julia Gillard in the Australian government. And I was like, oh my God, if there's one thing that I'm not strong at is politics, because it's never really interested me too much. And I was like, how am I going to survive this? And what kind of, like, that person already thinking about her, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to be able to impress her? And so it got me quite nervous, but in the end it went really well. And she appreciated the knowledge and the experience I brought from a marketing perspective, because they didn't actually have that in the team. So it was still to this day one of my most exciting roles, and I was stretched to my absolute limits, but in a good way, because I learned so much. I previously had never worked with, educational ministries and the government and representatives of the government and how to work with them and schools and how to approach them for educational programs. And likewise, the internal programs that we were running, it was such an exciting time to be putting together fun runs for the team and do fundraising through the whole company. One time we did a rowing contest, which got people talking for days because it was so exciting. We actually ended up putting a rowing machine into the I still remember I was planning it with an employee that had participated into a challenge and was rowing with the team at the time, and it's quite a huge competition in the world. And he approached me and asked if we can support it, and so we ended up. I said, if we support it, we need to make it big. It needs to be like an exciting kind of project for the whole company, and it's amazing as a team building experience. And so I still remember I went to the HR director at the time and I said to her, yes, well, this is what we're planning, la, 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 la. And we're thinking, would you be okay if we just use that particular meeting room? And she's like, well, if we're going to do that, we're going to do it properly. So we ended up putting it into the reception area. So every time somebody came to visit the company, they would see these teams rowing like crazy, being, sweating and excited, screaming, yelling in the reception area. And it went on for 3 days. It was such an exciting project, and people talked about it forever. It was, and just the feeling like how much you're actually contributing to the wellness, to the well-being of employees and the team support, and that being togetherness and working towards something together was so fun and special. Yeah, I haven't had anything comparable to this day. But what I want to say is there's always ways how you can find a way to get to where you want to get. This was quite a stretch for me, and it was a role I really had to grow into. But in my heart, it just felt right. And I really want to recommend to everybody, if you are holding on to something in your heart and you feel like there's a different place where you belong, there's always a way how you can get there. And I will tell you more about the projects I've done, because there's been a few interesting projects and experiences. And I've always managed to get there. And I know of other people that have done amazing, great career pivots and career changes. And you just have to the most important thing is that you know where you want to go. You need to analyze your situation, understand where your heart is, what you want, where your goal is, and then you put together the plan and you figure out a way how can I get there? How can I package up what I have in a way that you can sell it to whoever you want to sell it to? And what is very, very important, and I'm going to do some live workshops about that, is the manifestation part and the mindset part, because it really is important that you get yourself into the right mindset and into the right feeling and emotionally into the right place for where you want to go. It's incredibly crucial. So thank you so much for listening today. It's been a joy to share this story with you, and I will hear you back here very soon. Goodbye for now.
Stop the
All right. Hello. And I'm so grateful you were here today, tuning in and showing up for yourself. If you love this episode, can I ask for a quick high five? Yes, that's right. Just hit that subscribe button at the top and leave me a review and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration today. Your support really means the world. Let's also give ourselves a big hug for showing up, being honest, and supporting each other on this incredible journey. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'd really love to keep in touch. Until next time, keep being the incredible real you that the world needs. I'll see you back here soon.